I feel the tiger. I feel the tiger. I feel the tiger. Oh, I hear the tiger. And that must be your tiger, ready to pounce. Because on our program today, I'm going to be delivering what I promised you from our last episode, which is to talk about the 7 tiger principles, the basic philosophy, the manual of how the multiple natures theory works and how you're going to be able to apply all of these ideas about your potential and fulfilling it. And I know last episode I did promise you that you were going to get them, and instead I first delivered to you the tiger basics. I talked to you about the basic concepts of the tigers, and I explained to you also that it was necessary for me to do that because that was sort of like the wax on, the wax off. Those were the fundamental lessons that you needed to hear before we get into the big stuff. So, I mean, it's kind of like, as I said, with Karate Kid, you don't get to start doing roundhouse kicks and spinning back fists on the first day in the dojo. You got to do a little preparation work before you get there, right? Even Neo took a little bit of time to get up to speed with Morpheus. So in the same way, we got loads of programs in there. I know jujitsu, right? I know tigers. So this is going to be one of those loading programs. And what I'm going to do today is to just do a very quick, like less than 2 minutes. Maybe I'll try to do it in a minute and a half. Just go over those tiger basics one more time so we really got them and we're really sure. And then we will launch into the 7 principles, or the 7 tiger principles, as I call them. And my aim in providing these tools to you is that life is full of chaos, and we need to navigate the chaos of life. And in order to successfully navigate the chaos of life, we need tools. We can't do it without them. We've got GPS. That helps us through our days. Okay, in the olden days, you had compasses, maps, even in the not too far past, right? And there are all sorts of other tools that we're using today. If you're on the cutting edge, right, you got Chat GPT. You got to produce a lot of content. You got a tool that'll help you do it much faster. So one way or another, we need different types of tools to help us through this chaos of life. And the tool that I present to you is the multiple natures framework, the multiple natures system, and the tiger's philosophy is kind of like a way that you're going to implement that to connect with who you are and to help you get where it is that you want to go more effectively. So we're going to get way deep into this, so let's get ready for it. And we'll start off, as I said, with a very basic review of the tiger basics. So let me just bring that up over here and see if we get that going right. All right, there we go. Okay, feel good, feel comfortable with the tiger basics. So the tiger basics are something like this. So you have a nature. So your nature is who you are. It's your personality, how people know you. It is a collection of all of your qualities, kind of like if you have the different ingredients of flour and water and salt and whatnot. Together they make bread, and so there's a personality of that bread when it comes out. In the same way, you've got individual elements inside of you that add up and give you a unique quality of you. So that's what I mean by a nature. And that nature has 19 traits. And I call those, they're multiple intelligences and multiple natures, and they're like tigers. And I think I did show you this before, right? These are the MIs and the MNs. And I'm not going to go into detail about them because you will find them. I'll put them in the show notes. And I've talked about them extensively in other videos. So I'm going to hope that you've had a glance at these before so we can keep moving and get to all the other good stuff. So your tigers, they eat, but they don't eat food, they eat activities. Now, tigers can be of different sizes. And a tiger's appetite depends. Hang on just one second. Let me see if I could do something here to get, some stuff out of the way. Let's see what we can do about this. Ooh, there's got to be a way. Just hang in there. All right. One more second. All right, let's go with that for now. So tigers can be of different sizes. A tiger's appetite depends on its size and the amount that it eats. If a tiger eats too much, it gets overfed. If a tiger doesn't eat enough, it becomes hungry. Overfed tigers lead to stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and burnout. I know I've been there a lot of times before. I'm sure you've been there too. Hungry tigers lead to frustration and a feeling of lack of fulfillment, right? You got some creative thing that wants to eat, but you don't feed it, then it's going to give you that sort of feeling. When someone has significantly underfed or overfed tigers, they're misaligned. When someone has appropriately fed tigers that are not significantly overfed or underfed, they're considered aligned. And when someone is misaligned, it can create problems in their life, such as leading them to become physically or mentally ill. It can also be the cause of conflict in relationships. A satisfied tiger is one that is neither overfed nor underfed. It's fed the appropriate amount of activity. And finally, the state of swastha exists when a person, and swastha means enduring well-being. The state of swastha exists when a person's tigers are consistently satisfied over an extended period of time. So I hope these tiger basics make sense and you find them of value for what it is we're about to launch into. So those are the basics. You need to know those things in order to receive what we're about to step into next. So there's 7 principles, and I thought about these over time. I didn't want too many. I didn't want too few. 7 is a really good number, and so that's how I sort of settled on it. And here are the principles that guide the tiger's philosophy. So let's jump straight into it. Okay, these are the tiger principles, number 1. So the first is know your tigers, right? If you are going to be operating a particular vehicle, then you need to know what kind of vehicle that you're driving. And if you're not really aware of yourself and of what your qualities are, then you're not going to be able to have control over it. And I think for most people that's important. If you're driving a car, if you're driving a scooter or a motorcycle, bicycle, you have to know what type of vehicle it is that you're operating, and that's going to give you the ability to plan, to estimate, to be at ease with that instrument. Because if you don't, your expectations are going to be radically affected by that. In other words, if you're used to driving a sports car and you zip around really quickly, and for whatever reason you don't have access to that car, maybe the car's in repair and you have a loaner car or something like that, you got a sedan, it's maybe like 12, 15 years old, you're not going to be able to drive it in the same fashion. There are going to be all sorts of limitations. Or if you've got to take the bus, right now everything changes. You've got to go on a schedule, and you've got to wait around until the bus gets there. So in the same way, the vehicle that you're operating within, this body, your mind, your psychology, if you know what the elements are and how they operate, you will be able to effectively plan how to engage them so your expectations will be met. And most people that I know, most people that I meet, the majority, go through life with what I would say is a vague understanding of what their abilities are. They have certain ideas, certain prominent qualities they know, but it's more of I would say like a subconscious understanding of them. From time to time, they know they've got certain talents or abilities. It will emerge. They know, but at the same time, there are qualities that they might not be tuned into. I'll give you an example. Healing nature, right? So somebody might have a really powerful healing nature. That means this tendency to help others out of pain. But it never really came into their life. Maybe this person did an MBA. They go into business, and they become working in a hedge fund. And I knew a person like this. Guy who worked in a hedge fund in Paris, and I had a workshop with their organization. And it was so interesting because he was among people who were like sort of shark type people that you might find in a hedge fund. Maybe not all, but like okay, there is a stereotype around that. And this guy had a highly healing and providing nature that just seemed so incongruent with the environment that he was in. And in interacting with him, I could see that he was suffering. Because on one side, the activities that he was doing and activities he was engaged in were requiring him to be quite cutthroat in the work that he was in, when his inner self was telling him to be kind and healing and helpful. And this was certainly a cause of distress for him. So knowing who you are, knowing what your qualities are, will enable you to take the right decisions. My guess is that if he had known those things clearly when he was, 16, 17, 18, he would have been in a very different position to choose a career that was probably closer to, even if it was in business, it would have been closer to an occupational psychologist or a therapist of some sort. That would have spoken to him, and I'm sure that by age, I guess he was about late 50s when I interacted with him, he probably wouldn't have been in that distressful situation. He would have found work that really resonated. So the first principle is to know your nature. You got to know what your tigers are, right? So that's the first principle, is knowing your tigers. Okay. The next one is to embrace your tigers. So what does that mean, to embrace your tigers? So to embrace your tigers, let's do that so you can see it. How's that? Okay, yeah. So to embrace your tigers. Embracing your tigers means, well, at first when I developed this particular principle, I first called it accept your tigers. And my idea here was that when you not just know what your tigers are, but you take them in, you allow them to be, you recognize them as yours, you accept them, you're in the right position to move forward with them. But at the same time, this word, I didn't like this word accept, because somehow the word accept has this connotation of having to take sort of like having to compromise, right? In other words, these are my tigers? Well, I guess I'm going to have to accept them. And I don't think that that's the right attitude. That's why I chose the word embrace. Every set of tigers, your set of tigers, your unique set of tigers, is perfect, is beautiful, has the possibility and the potential to bring the individual happiness. So this is the great thing. Everybody can find happiness, but the way that each person is going to find it is going to be entirely different, and is going to be largely dependent on the qualities that they have. And this flies in the face of what I see popularly, like what I see on the internet, what I see with so many courses, and in general, this idea that if you want to be successful, be like me. And I see quite a bit of that, where there are courses, content, programs, celebrities, and so on, that seem to pitch to people that, like, this is the way, like my way, be like me, and if you do like me, be like me. And I even think that it's not just pitched to people. I think that people also erroneously make that mistake themselves. They look at others, and they see others who are in alignment with their tigers, and whose tigers are just running free, and they're successful in what it is that they do. And they say, gee, I want to be like that person. I want to have what that person has. And the mistake that they make is trying to get what that person has. It might be materially or in terms of what they do and whatnot. They try to copy them, mimic them, and to no surprise, they don't find that same happiness or success or wealth or fame or whatever it is that they aspire to. And the reason is that, there's a song that I wrote a while ago called Rock Your Role. I'll try to get it into the show notes. That says, you'll never find success singing someone else's tune, nor reach the stars by dancing in someone else's shoes. Right? And this also can be traced back to the Bhagavad Gita. And that, in case you don't know, the Bhagavad Gita is, well, it's kind of like what the Bible is to Western civilization or Western culture. The Bhagavad Gita is to India. So it's a book with, it's a story from mythology about two warring families and a warrior who doesn't want to fight because he doesn't want to kill the members of the opposite army, many of whom are his friends and family members, etc. So I won't go into the whole story now. In fact, I have narrated it in great depth and with in a dramatic interpretation in one of my videos, and I'll also get a show notes to that if you want to see it. But the concept, in that the protagonist doesn't want to fight Arjuna. He says to Krishna, who's his charioteer, that I don't want to fight because various reasons. And Krishna basically says to him, look, you've got to fight. It's in your blood. It's in your nature, prakriti. Same thing I'm talking about right now. He says it's your nature to be a warrior, so you've got to do that. And Arjuna basically says, no, I could do anything else. I could leave the battlefield. And Krishna tells him, this is in chapter 3 of the Gita, he says that it's better to do your own work imperfectly rather than to do somebody else's work perfectly, because trying to do somebody else's work will only bring about, and the word in Sanskrit that he uses is bhay, B-H-A-Y, bhay. It'll only bring bhay. Now, bhay could be interpreted as anxiety, fear, neurosis. That's the best way to bring it about. And something that's super interesting around this, I'm going to talk about this in just a bit when we get to the habitats, is even animals. It's the same thing with animals, right? Animals have a particular nature and they behave that way, and when they don't really get to behave in the way that they're supposed to, they also get a type of neurosis. I'm going to save that until later. We're going to come back to that, so remember this point when we get down to number 6, which is create habitats. So in essence, what we're talking about here is to embrace who it is that you are, because when you do that, you're in the best position, and it's the greatest chance and your greatest possibility to attain swastha, to attain enduring happiness, because you're not going to get there by not embracing it or to deny certain aspects of yourself. You might have a quality about you, like maybe you're very introverted. You do not have a big, what I call, interpersonal tiger. But if you beat yourself up over that, you're not doing yourself any justice. Why am I so introverted? What's my problem? Right? Or maybe you're highly interpersonal and very entertaining, and you're always out there. And then you sort of say, oh gosh, I'm such a loudmouth and I'm always irritating people and so on. And you get on your case for that. You just want to deny that of yourself. So you might have a highly protective nature. You're very like a perfectionist about things. And then you get on your case for being that and say, I have to change. I have to stop being so. So this never works, and if you try to undo that or you try to avoid those things, that's what's going to bring about what Krishna told Arjuna, bhay, which is anxiety, stress, neurosis, fear. So number two is embrace your tigers. Love those tigers. They are yours. And they are going to lead you to your happiness. So it's best to become really good friends with them and see what they can do. Here's the next one. Track your tigers. Track your tigers. So what do I mean by track your tigers? So by track your tigers, I mean that you have to know what they're up to. You've got to know when they're hungry. You've got to know when they're overfed. You have to know when they're satisfied. And this might sound a little bit weird, like I'm anthropomorphizing these qualities. I don't know if that's anthropomorphized because that would be turning them into humans, and I'm tiger-pomorphizing them or feline-pomorphizing them or something like that, whatever it might be. I'm turning the tigers into personalities. I'm turning your personality into tigers. And, well, it's helpful in a couple of ways. It's helpful because it's a fun way to think about it. But I think it also makes me pay attention to them a little bit more when I feel that they have some sort of personal quality about them. It's just for fun. It's just for fun. I have a daughter. She's 2.5 years old. Her name is Lily. She's really cute and really funny. She's entertaining. I think she gets some of it from me. And one of the things that I notice about her is that, and if you have kids, you probably also notice this, is that when she gets hungry, she doesn't realize it. She's busy playing with her blocks or with her books or with, I don't know, with her bicycle or something like that. And so she's so busy, she gets hungry and doesn't realize it. And she starts to get angry, fussy, short-tempered. She'll cry. And, you know, sometimes I'm unaware of that. And I say to myself, like, what's up with her? Like, why is she, like, I notice that she seems to be crying, like, almost like unnecessarily. Like, that shouldn't have triggered her in a way that would have caused her to cry, whatever it might be. Something falls on the floor and she starts to cry. I'm like, why is she crying about that? And then suddenly I realize, aha, she must, either she's hungry or she's tired, or, you know, she's wet. Like those might be like the options. Or she has to go to the bathroom, right? And so, you know, I'm still a new dad, even at while she's 2.5. I'm sort of figuring those things out. And so it's like, okay, honey, do you have to go to the bathroom? All right, or are you hungry? And then once I determine that, get her to take care of those things, get her to eat, and right afterwards, she's back to normal again. She's okay. And I think it's the same way with your tigers. You might have this musical tiger that needs to eat, or an intrapersonal tiger. Sorry, I think I pushed the wrong button when I was trying to mute my cough. Let me try that again. Let's just do it. Hold on. How was that? Was that better? You didn't hear that, right? Okay. All right. So if you have a hungry tiger, you might not realize that it's hungry, and then it's causing you to be stressed out. Now, you might not cry, but you certainly might lash out at other people. You certainly might get really angry or frustrated and, you know, take it out on somebody a certain way. You might suddenly feel miserable and don't know what's wrong with you. So this is what I mean by track your tigers. There you go. Which is, you've got to keep on top of them. You have to keep your eye out so you know whether they're hungry, whether they're overfed, or they're underfed. So that's the whole idea behind tracking your tigers. Just keep in touch with them and know what they need. Okay, ready for the next one. Feed your tigers. Okay, this is the next one. Feed your tigers. And this is where it comes into play, where it comes into application. And for feeding your tigers, I think the important thing is, like, this is where you engage them and you have a strategy and tactics for how you're going to put them into work, whether it's through full-time job, whether it's through part-time work, whether it's through leisure activities. There are many ways that you'll be able to engage your tigers. And I was just talking with somebody recently, and I noticed that he called me up and he said to me, it's a friend, he said, I'm just feeling so overwhelmed. I'm feeling like depressed right now. And the funny thing was, the day before I had spoken to him and he had told me, I'm living my dream life. I feel like I'm living my dream life. It was very interesting. And the next day he said, I'm overwhelmed. So I said to him, hey man, I acknowledge your feelings, But I don't get it because yesterday you told me you were living your dream life, but today you're telling me that like you feel overwhelmed. So like, what gives? And he said that he said, yeah, overall the things that I'm doing in the direction that I'm heading in is totally right. It's just, and he said, but I don't know what it is right now. And what's got me feeling like this? And we spent a little time talking, and what I asked him was, I noticed something about you, which is that from the beginning of the day until the end of the day, I see that you're constantly engaged in something. And through the week and on the weekends, like you always have something going on. And I even wondered like how you fit all of that into your schedule, all those things. So many different activities. And he said, you know what, you're right. I don't have enough downtime. And there was one particular thing that was so in this case it's like he's been feeding his tigers, but he's been feeding them too much. And he needed to recharge his batteries by slowing down off of those and just doing something simple. He's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And we went through a couple of things, and he finally settled on. He said, you know what? I just need to get in my bed, do nothing for a while, and just read a spiritual book. He said, if I do that, that'll really take care. And so that's what he did, and it wound up working out. And so what I mean here is that with feeding your tigers, there are many ways that you can do it, and there are many strategies that you can take, and you need to figure out how to do it by not overfeeding them and by not underfeeding them, and finding a way to engage them all. So that is number 4, feeding your tigers. And I have other tools that I've talked about in the past before, and that I will continue to share with you. One of them is called the Menu of Life, where I was alluding to it just before, how you can find different tactics in distributing the way your tigers get fed. In other words, like through a hobby, that's like dessert. So I call it the Menu of Life. Through a main course, that's like your main job. And through side work, that would be like appetizers. So, you go to a restaurant, you have an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert. You get nutrition and pleasure from all of them in different amounts. And in the same way, when you work, you could do like an appetizer, like side work. Main course is like your main course is like your main job, and then dessert is like an interest or leisure activity, recreation, hobbies. And so that's just an organizer that I use, and I have done stuff on this. I'll try to get some show notes for you about that. It's called the Menu of Life. It's a great tool to help you in the organizing process. Okay, so that's about feeding your tigers. Let's keep going. The next is to know others' tigers. So it's not enough just to know your own tigers, right? As they say, no tiger is an island entire itself, right? It's a part of the jungle. So when you interact with people, if you're only operating from your own set of tigers, like animals do, I suppose, like when we say that like this how animals behave, person behaves like an animal, it means that they're sort of like looking out from their own view or their own perspective without any sense of thinking about how the other creature thinks, feels, etc. So in the same way, when people do the same, I think sometimes we call them sharks, right? Somebody who's predatory. So they're only thinking about their best interest. They're looking out at the others, at other people as means to their end, or resources or objects to be exploited. And so when a person is only thinking mostly from their own perspective, and I mean, there's a little bit of judgment in that, or I might say that might be more like on an extreme side. I think people can also be a little bit more sensitive, but still in their heads, still really only thinking about their own set of qualities. So what happens when you do that, right? Let's just say that I'm highly educative, right? I love to teach and I love to explain things. and I'm entertaining and somewhat creative. So if I look out, I look out and highly intrapersonal, right? I think a lot about being interpersonal tiger. I think a lot about life and do a lot of self-reflection. Musical is also a big tiger of mine, right? So if I look out at the world from those set of tigers, and I think that everybody else is like that, or I'm not aware enough of how they're thinking. So what happens is I start to impose my own worldview on them. And that can also be true of other things, like, political perspectives or otherwise. But here we're talking about tigers and natures. So in other words, like, let's just say my protective is low, small tiger. I'm not really worried about, I make a lot of mistakes. I push the wrong buttons once in a while. It's okay, I don't mind. As long as the rest of the stuff keeps flowing. So what happens is that if I meet somebody and I'm working with somebody on a team, they're highly protective. Well, then it can start to become irritating for me. They're always like finding mistakes, or they're always trying to make me follow certain paths, or you have to do it this way, or we need to have a process for that. I feel like, it's just like a stick in the mud, it's just slowing me down. And it might be necessary. It's just that, like, my tigers aren't like that. Or I might have 1,000 creative ideas, and I just want to keep going through all of them. Somebody else who I'm interacting with might not. They have a small creative tiger. And so when they hear all my creative ideas coming out, then it's like, it's overwhelming for them. It's like too much. They can't handle it. And then I might be like, well, what's wrong with them? Why can't they deal with this? It's just one more small idea. But for them, it might be like a mountain. So this idea of knowing other people's tigers is firstly important in good communication with other people. And when I think about the first is to know my own tigers, right? That was way back number one, right? And being able to communicate what my tigers are like to other people, well, that's really good communication, to let people know that, listen, my administrative is a small tiger. I was just talking to one of my team members today saying, listen, I need you, she's highly administrative, and I said to her, look, I need you to keep the schedule for something, and you've got to tell me, you've got to come after me, because I might get into my creative zone and I'll miss out on those things. So I communicate to her what my set of big and small tigers are, so she's also aware of that. And then what happens when I do that is that it doesn't become, there's much less of that risk for hierarchical, I don't know what you would call it, like pressure or muscling, like I'm the boss, therefore, like, do it my way, or you can't question me, etc. It's really clear. I say, look, these are the areas where I have big tigers, where I have natural competence, and these are the areas where I don't, and where you do. It doesn't matter that this person might be an assistant, and I might be the CEO of the company. It's just that we have differing sets of tigers. And this leads me to the next aspect of knowing others' tigers, which has to do with working together in complementary ways. Now, I've said this before, we hear this cliche all the time when there are people who are successful in one way or another. They say this, they'll be interviewed. What's the secret to your success? And then they say something like, oh, I just surrounded myself with people who are smarter than me, right? And that's just not true. It's like some false humility going on in there. I would say that the more real, in most cases, the more realistic or more truthful answer is they surrounded themselves with people who are complementary to them. So they might have had a set of big tigers that were X, Y, and Z. Another person had a set of tigers that were, D, H, and K, and they had somebody else on their team who was like A, N, and Z, and W, and they found a way to complement each other. So knowing others' tigers first helps to communicate effectively. And I call that natural communication, something like natural communication, right? You communicate clearly about your nature and you understand other people's natures. So you have this natural communication going on. And then number two, you find ways to work together in a complementary, synchronistic, harmonious manner. And that's what this number 5 has to do with knowing others' natures. And that's what it is, and that's why it's important. Okay. Let's look at the next one. Create habitats for your tigers. Remember I was talking about that before with the animals, so let's come back to the animals. All right. So what does that mean? Creating habitats for your tigers. So what that means is this, that all creatures live in any living entity, organism lives in some kind of habitat. And there's some that are wet, and there's some that are hot, and there's some that are dry, and there's some that have a high altitude, and there's some that are like, dense brush and jungly and rainforests and, right? So there are all sorts of habitats and lots of different different creatures exist in those habitats. So, tigers have certain habitat that they're the real ones that they live in, and, like certain type of fish have different ones, and certain plants live at a very high altitude. So in the same way, you, with your unique set of tigers, you have habitats that are conducive to your happiness. I don't know if you've ever thought about it that way. Now, I mean, part of it could be geographically or in terms of whether you're working like inside or outside or those sort of things. But what I mean is that, like, if you have like, let's say a big adventurous tiger, you love to take risks. Now, those could be financial risks, they could be physical risks. If, like, your bodily was a big tiger and your adventurous was a big, big adventurous plus big bodily means, like, you need to be doing some sort of extreme bodily stuff, whether that's, like, extreme sports or pushing yourself, marathon running, etc. If you don't have access to doing that, then that's certainly going to lead you to be unfulfilled, right? If you've got a really high linguistic and creative tiger, and you don't have the opportunity to do creative writing and, whether it could be like creative writing for a company or it could be like story writing or script writing or something, that doesn't really matter. But if you don't have an opportunity to engage those tigers, then you're not in a habitat that's nurturing that. And like in my case, I have myself surrounded. I got a keyboard over there. I've got a ukulele over there. I've got stuff around me that when I need it, I feel, hey, I've got that here. I feel comfortable in my environment. I've got like cameras and stuff. I like to shoot video. I've got tools on my desktop that support me in the kind of work that I do. I'm very particular about the technologies that I have that support me. Like, you might have watched some of my other videos or read some of my blog posts. I've been writing a lot about ChatGPT because I've been using that as an extension of my own linguistic and creative abilities to be about, 5 to 10 times more productive than I normally am. Like, I'm able to write, like, with the help of ChatGPT. If I have to write a blog article, I can put out about, like, 3 good articles in an hour. And I'm not saying that, it's not like ChatGPT wrote them. I'm writing them. I'm just utilizing it for structuring and language and ideas and stuff, and I know how to squeeze it out of there. So it's creating an environment for me that's allowing me to thrive by having a tool like that, and having my musical stuff, and having my video stuff, and the kind of people who I'm working with, and who are around me and who surround me. That's my habitat. I've created that habitat. And when I was talking about those animals before, what I wanted to share with you, this is really interesting. Animals, as I said, have environments that they need to have certain things in their environment to feel like normal. And think about a zoo for a minute. So when you go to a zoo, like, what do you see? Like, you see all sorts of animals from all over the world, from different climates and regions and stuff like that, right? All in small cages or like little areas. And they try to some degree to put some things that look like the environment where they come from. But you know and I know, and you know what? They know too, that that's really not what their habitat is. I mean, they might not know it consciously. But something that I was reading that I found fascinating is, first let's talk about people. When you're not in a habitat that supports you, then what happens? Well, if you don't have access to the kind of tools you need, the kind of people who complement you and other things in your environment, well, you start to get anxious, you start to get stressed. And when that happens for lengthy periods of time, you will wind up having problems. Now, the problems could be physical problems, and they can also be psychological problems. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason people have, say, psychological problems, mental health problems. There can be plenty of other reasons. But this absolutely contributes to it. When you have certain natural propensities that you have to entertain and be funny. You have to be interacting with people. You need naturalistic tiger. You need to be outside with flora and fauna. Intrapersonal, you need to be able to reflect and talk to people about self-reflection and things, so on and so forth. When you don't have those things, you will feel like you are in a cage. Have you ever felt like a caged animal, like you feel like you're trapped? I mean, I know I have before, in the past before. And if it continues for a period of time, that's when different types of psychosis and neurosis is going to develop. And there is, believe it or not, among animals in zoos, something called zoochosis. And that's when the animals start to essentially freak out because they're not in their natural habitat. And you can look this up. It's ZOOCHOSIS, zoochosis. And the factors or the symptoms that you'll see is the animals pace back and forth. Like if you've ever been to if you've seen tigers in a zoo, right? They're pacing back and forth, they're pacing back and forth, they're pacing back and forth. If you've ever seen animals like swaying and constantly swaying, or chewing on cages, things like that, they display behaviors that, if you see them in the wild, those are not normal behaviors. But that's what they're doing in order to compensate, or in order to, and it's funny, like you'll see well, it's not that it's funny, but you'll see those kind of behaviors sometimes in people too, in very extreme situations. People who might be in a mental health facility, they might be like shaking or talking to themselves or having repetitive movements or motions. Okay, that's at the extreme end, but what I want to say is that, just look at all these elements, look at these pieces together, and if you don't create that kind of environment that's going to feed your tigers, you don't create that habitat, then you're leading yourself down that path of caging your tigers. That's what's down the end of that path, the end of that tunnel. The other end of the spectrum is when you create a habitat that absolutely feeds your tigers. That's a whole nother ballgame. There you're going to find happy tigers. That's when we talk about fulfilling your potential. And it's not something that happens by itself. It's something that you got to work on. It's something that you have to invest some time in. And if you've made it this far, that means that you're investing some time in understanding the theory and the concepts behind it. Good stuff. Okay. So that's number 6, creating habitats for your tigers. And that leads us to our last one. This is the big one. Get ready. Elevate your tigers. Elevate your tigers. So what does elevate your tigers have to deal with? So elevating your tigers is, okay, once you know all of those things, you have the basics down, then what? What are you going to do with your tigers? Well, I see 2 main areas, 2 aspects. Maybe there are more, but right now these are the 2 that I see. One is developing and evolving them. you can certainly like work on them. You might want to explore like them in new and interesting ways and combine them in different ways. It's not to say that like just because your musical is a small tiger or your adventurous is a small tiger or whatever it might be, that you can't also engage them. That's certainly, a lot of people will tell you, lead with your strengths. Don't worry about your weaknesses. Or, I mean, some people say something silly like, turn your weaknesses into strengths. That's really dumb. And you've probably also heard me talk about why I don't believe in strengths and weaknesses. I have a blog post on that. Try to get it in show notes. And so that's also not a great idea, that you only focus. Perhaps at the beginning and when you're making certain big choices, it's important to know that the bigger tigers need to be in the front with certain things, but the smaller tigers also have a role to play. And I've talked about this many ways. Check out that article on strengths and weaknesses. It's I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, and I think that it's a very powerful perspective. But here what I mean to say is that I think sometimes it's okay, not sometimes, but it is okay and it's important that you not just embrace, but you engage all of the tigers and explore them. So this is one way to elevate them, right? That you're in touch with all of them and you're not neglecting any of them. So that's one aspect. The second aspect of elevating your tigers has to do with your purpose or meaning. Purpose and meaning in life. So when I interact with people, I'm always very interested about this. I have a lot of conversations around purpose and meaning, clients, and I do men's work, so some of the men that I interact with, this is a topic that comes up quite frequently. What's your purpose? What's your purpose in life? Sometimes some coaches use tools like Ikigai, work with clients, and they try to help them find some sort of purpose. And what we find is that, you can have like one big purpose, and it could be something grand, like you want to do something at the world level for sustainability or for saving a particular species that might be going extinct, like tigers or whatever it might be. And you have some big purpose that you're working for. But purpose also doesn't have to be grandiose. Purpose can also be supporting your family, taking care of your kids. It could be trying to make a change in your industry or in policy. So those could all be purposes that could be happening at different levels. And it's also possible to have more than one purpose at a time. I could be working for the betterment of my family or for my daughter and working to create tools that help people fulfill their potential, align their potential so they thrive. Those have multiple purposes. But the elevation part, the elevation part comes in when I connect my tigers to my purpose. So in other words, like I've seen people in the past who they latch onto an idea, like a big idea, some sort of big project that they want to work on. Like there was one person who I knew wanted to make a very big change in his country, sensitizing them to certain ways of life and certain spiritual practices. He had really big plans to do that, and he fulfilled them to a degree. But at the same time, he wasn't fully in alignment with his own tigers. And when he tried to run these projects, like he was not at all administrative. Right? He was entrepreneurial, so he had big ideas, and he was highly intrapersonal, wanted to get them done. But not at all administrative. And at the same time, he also wasn't very providing, like giving, and thinking about other people, nor educative. wasn't great at explaining or teaching or helping other people to understand things. So as an organizational leader, he went through a lot of assistants. Like every 3 months or 6 months, he would have to get a new assistant. They would quit on him inevitably. He went through so many in time that I know. And there were a lot of, it was like the vision that he had was really great, but so at that sort of visionary level, things were excellent in the organization, a lot of courses and workshops, but at the human level, like when you would talk to people, there was a lot of like gossip and people always bad-mouthing him, talking about him behind his back, and a lot of infighting and a lot of tears. And when I used to interact with the like students who were part of the organization, they were very upset. There were some things that they loved, but at the same time there was a lot of dissatisfaction. And so here's an example of somebody who had a great purpose, but his tigers were absolutely misaligned with what was going on. Well, things changed when he sort of stepped down. They tried to throw him out a few times when he stepped down, and somebody who had a greater set of those tigers that I mentioned, who was much more providing, who was much more educative, and could and administrative, could enroll people and get things done. And the organization started to succeed much more on all fronts when he stepped in. So in a case like that, what I want to say is to elevate your tigers doesn't mean to just have, like if it's not enough to have a big purpose and to apply yourself, because I believe that there are many people who hurt people in that process, even if it's unintentional. But when you've got some sort of purpose and you know how to align those tigers with it, well, then what happens is that you get air in the sails and your purpose gets a lift. The tigers are fully engaged and you're leaning into having that purpose. Sort of just creates like this vacuum that brings you in and enables that potential to expand. But when the purpose is there and the tigers are misaligned with that, there's friction between the two. They'll always be bouncing off of each other and creating problems for you. So that brings me to the conclusion of this one: elevating your tigers. Figure out what your purpose is and figure out how you can connect your tigers to that, and then just watch what happens to your purpose. Okay, let's do a quick review. Here they are. Know your tigers. It's the 7 tiger principles. Know your tigers. Embrace your tigers. Track your tigers. Feed your tigers. Know others' tigers. Create habitats for your tigers. And elevate your tigers. So, there you go. Those are the 7 tiger principles that provide you with a way of thinking about how to engage your tiger. So now you got the basics. Wax on, wax off. Now you got the 7 principles. And there'll be more. We'll take perhaps some of these principles and go into depth with each one over time. And I hope you enjoyed our interaction today. And if you like these ideas that I'm sharing with you about your tigers, and you want to know more about yours, one way that you can do so is by taking the MN test. Go online, www.multiplenatures.com, and if you go here, there's a link to taking the MN test. And it's only 20 minutes online, and you'll get a really clear idea of which are those big ones and the small ones, so you know how to feed them. And if you are a guidance professional, you would like to use multiple natures with the clients you serve, then this is how you can do that. We've got a course called the MN Practitioners Course. It's a certified program. It is accredited by the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And we've got over 150 practitioners from all over the world who are using multiple natures to help people find their tigers and go through these 7 principles and really help them to connect to their purpose in tigers ultimately. And with that, I'll say don't forget to like the video if you like what you heard today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you do that, then every time I've got a new video out, you'll get some notification about it. Send me an email. Tell me what's up. Tell me what you're thinking. Leave some comments for me. I'd love to hear from you and to find out how you're feeding your tigers and if the 7 principles are working for you. And with that, I will say thanks for joining in. I hope you had fun. Hope you learned something valuable. And don't forget to feed your tigers before they eat you. I'm Stephen Rudolph, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.